The Reign of the Kings. Creation. Episode 6.
The story of Israel's kings begins with Saul, the first monarch chosen by God through the prophet Samuel. Standing head and shoulders above others, Saul started as a promising leader but ultimately failed through disobedience. His reign marked the beginning of Israel's monarchy in 1050 BC. After Saul's downfall came David, the shepherd boy who became Israel's greatest king. A warrior, poet, and man after God's own heart, David unified the kingdom and established Jerusalem as its capital. Under his 40-year reign, Israel reached its golden age. Solomon, David's son, inherited a prosperous kingdom. Known for his wisdom and wealth, he built the magnificent First Temple in Jerusalem. But his excessive taxation and foreign marriages led to division. After his death, the kingdom split into two: Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The northern kingdom of Israel saw a succession of dynasties, most following idolatry. Kings like Ahab and Jeroboam led the people away from God. After 2 centuries, Assyria conquered the northern kingdom in 722 BC. The southern kingdom of Judah maintained David's dynasty. Some kings like Hezekiah and Josiah brought religious reforms, but others embraced paganism. In 586 BC, Babylonian forces destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, ending the independent monarchy. After decades of foreign rule came the Hasmonean dynasty, priest kings who won independence from the Seleucid Empire. They ruled until internal conflicts allowed Rome to gain control. The final king was Herod the Great, an Edomite appointed by Rome. Despite his magnificent building projects, including the renovation of the Second Temple, Herod was known for his paranoia and cruelty. His death in 4 BC marked the end of an era that had begun with Saul a millennium earlier.
Saul becomes the first king of Israel.
Israel's demand for a king was answered by God, and he chose Saul, the son of Kish, to be king over his children Israel. However, Saul was a son of Benjamin. It had been prophesied by Jacob, when he prayed over and blessed his 12 sons, that the line of the kings would come from his son Judah. In Genesis 49, verse 10, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet." Jesus himself testifies of this in Revelation 22, verse 16, saying, "I am the root and offspring of David, the bright and morning star." The Lord commanded Samuel to anoint Saul as king because Saul was the people's king. He was a handsome man and a head taller than the average Israel man of his day. This tall and good-looking Benjamite was probably a charismatic figure in his day. Unfortunately, he was not a man after God's own heart. A time had come when the Lord commanded Saul to go up against the Amalek and totally destroy its people and livestock so that nothing remained. Saul, however, did not heed the Lord's words. Instead, he spared King Agag and the best of the Amalekites' livestock. Now, the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, "I greatly regret that I have set up Saul as king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments." It grieved Samuel, who cried out to the Lord all night.
The anointing of David.
Following the Lord's command, Samuel went to the house of Jesse, a son of the tribe of Judah, who dwelt in Bethlehem. Jesse had 8 sons, the youngest of whom was named David. David was a shepherd and keeper of his father, Jesse's flocks. Samuel came to Jesse's house with a flask of oil, believing that he was to anoint an elder son of Jesse as king. But he found out that the one he was to anoint was actually a ruddy-looking teenager, the least of all of Jesse's sons. But the Lord said to Samuel, Do not look at his appearance or physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Now 7 of Jesse's sons were with Samuel, but none were chosen of the 7 to be king. So Samuel asked Jesse if these were all of his sons. There remains yet the youngest. Then Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him." Now he was ruddy with bright eyes and good-looking. And the Lord said, "Arise, anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward.
David defeats Goliath.
David was born about the year 1044 BC and would not become king until the year 1014 BC, making him 30 years old when he became king. Before becoming king, while he was still of a young age, David defeated the Philistines' champion Goliath, who is recorded to have stood 6 cubits, a height of about 9 feet 6 inches. Goliath was believed to be the son of an angel because he was of such great stature. The children of Israel feared this Philistine champion, but David had no fear of this giant. When Saul heard of the things David had said, he called for him, and David said to King Saul,
"Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine."
Go, and the Lord be with you.
Saul tried to array David in his armor, but David was smaller in stature than the king. David took his staff in hand, and his sling, the weapon of a shepherd, picked 5 smooth stones from the brook, and went out to the Philistine. David placed one of those smooth stones in his sling and shot it at the giant. The stone struck Goliath in the forehead, killing him, and David took the Philistine's sword out of its sheath and cut the giant's head off with it. When the Philistine army saw their champion dead at the hands of this ruddy boy, they took flight, and the Israelites pursued them, killing many on that day. David grew in stature and became a mighty warrior in Saul's army and slew many Philistines. David was a great hero among his people, and the Israel women sang of his victories. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. However, these chants for David were displeasing to Saul, because he saw that the people loved David and favored him more than himself.
Now what more can he have but the kingdom?
From that time on, Saul sought to destroy David, but David was beloved by all of Israel, so Saul was careful with his plot of David's demise. David eventually won the favor of Saul's daughter, Michal. He married her. The dowry that was asked for by Saul for her hand in marriage was 100 foreskins of the Philistines. David delivered the 100 foreskins, and Michal was given to him as his wife. David was now as a prince in the house of Saul. Nonetheless, Saul still was displeased with David. David and Jonathan, Saul's eldest son and heir to his throne, shared a profound brotherly love for one another. This was again displeasing to Saul because he feared for Jonathan and his stake to the throne. Saul tried several times to take David's life, but each attempt would be yet another failure for the indelicate king. Because of Saul's relentless unresolved concerning David, David was forced to live as a refugee among his enemies.
The medium of Endor.
Following Samuel's death, the Philistines gathered their forces against Israel. King Saul, having fallen from God's favor, assembled his armies at Gilboa. With Samuel dead and God silent, Saul received no divine guidance, neither through dreams nor prophets. In desperation, Saul sought a medium in Endor, hoping to speak with Samuel's spirit. He hoped that the medium could awaken Samuel for him so that Samuel could tell him the outcome of this battle. The medium was able to awaken Samuel from his sleep, and Samuel came up from Hades wearing a white mantle.
Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?
And Saul began to tell Samuel of the Philistines, and that God has sent no word to him.
And the Lord has done for himself as he spoke by me. For the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines.
Even in his death, Samuel prophesied doom over Saul and his sons. As Samuel had told Saul, he and his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, were killed on the battlefield. Following Saul's death, David traveled to Hebron with his 2 wives and his men and their families, where they settled in the cities of Hebron. Then the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, "The men of Jabesh-Gilead were the ones who buried Saul." David reigned 7.5 years in Hebron before he became king of all Israel. After this, he reigned 33 years in Jerusalem, until the time of his death at the age of 70 years old. David began his reign in Jerusalem about the year 1007 BC. At one point, Israel was at war with the Ammonites. David, while Israel was in battle, came out to the roof of his house one evening and saw a woman bathing on her rooftop. The woman was very beautiful, and David grew wanton towards her. So David sent for the woman, whose name was Bathsheba, and lay with her. She became pregnant with his child. Unfortunately, Bathsheba was a married woman, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, who was in battle against the Ammonites. David sent for Uriah, hoping that he would take leave from the battle and lay with his wife. But Uriah, being loyal to his fellow soldiers in battle, would not go lie with his wife Bathsheba. When David found this out, he sent Uriah back into battle with a letter to Joab, his commander. This what is recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 11 verse 15. And he wrote in the letter saying, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retreat from him, that he may be struck down and die." This was a terrible betrayal against Uriah, David's servant, and the Lord's anger was hot against David. The Lord sent Nathan the prophet to David with a parable concerning this evil he committed against his commandments.
I have sinned against the Lord.
The Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not surely die. However, because by this deed you have given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, the child also who is born to you shall surely die.
As Nathan had said, Bathsheba's child lived only a short time, 7 days. For the entire 7 days of his life, his father David fasted while pleading with the Lord to spare his life. Even with the unfortunate death of her first child, Bathsheba would bear other sons to David Solomon, who would reign in his father's place as king. Nathan, whose descendants would bring forth the Messiah, the Lion of Judah. David had many sons. The oldest, Amnon, would be murdered by his brother Absalom, regarding the rape of his sister Tamar. Absalom was also murdered in battle when he tried to overthrow his father, David. Through all this sorrow that would befall David, it would be Solomon who would become king over Israel. While David reigned in Jerusalem, he wanted to build a house to the Lord, but his request was denied by God because of the blood on his hands. However, the Lord did promise David this in 2 Samuel. "When your days are fulfilled, and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." So, this great task of building a house to the Lord in Jerusalem fell to David's son Solomon, who became well known for his wisdom. It is recorded in the Bible that the Queen of Sheba came to hear the words of Solomon, and upon hearing and seeing the great accomplishments of this man, she said this, "Happy are your men, and happy are these servants, who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God, who delighted in you, setting you on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord has loved Israel forever, therefore he made you king, to do justice and righteousness.
The Temple Mount.
And it came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. Solomon began the construction of the temple about the year 970 BC, and completed it about the year 963 BC, approximately 7 years. Solomon reigned 40 years over Israel, and in that time period he gained for himself much wealth. It is also recorded in 1 Kings that Solomon gained 700 wives and 300 concubines. These women came from many kingdoms, and with them came many of their gods. Solomon would eventually stray from the Lord in his old age and begin to worship some of the gods of his wives and concubines. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, "Because you have done this, and have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days, for the sake of your father David. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away the whole kingdom. I will give one tribe to your son, for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." On the day of Solomon's death, about the year 934 BC, Rehoboam became king of Israel. However, as it was said by the word of the Lord, the kingdom was torn from his hand. David reigned over the whole of Israel for 33 years. Solomon reigned over Israel for 40 years. Now, the northern kingdom was given to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, to reign as king. The 10 northern tribes of Israel would never again be one with the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. These 10 northern tribes would eventually be scattered through the lands of their captor Assyria. Today they have come to be known as the lost tribes of Israel. Rehoboam reigned over the tribes of Judah and Benjamin for 17 years, and there was war between him and Jeroboam throughout his entire reign. During the reigns of the kings of Judah and Israel, many prophets of God came with their messages of doom to their defiant and rebellious kings. One of these kings, Ahab, took for a wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of Sidon. Ahab began to worship Baal. Then he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. Ahab did much evil in the sight of God, and, in his days, came a great prophet named Elijah. The prophet came to Ahab, saying, "As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, except by my word." And by the word of the Lord, given to Elijah, no rain fell on Israel for 3.5 years. Israel was cursed with no rain because of this king's idolatries and the wickedness of his wife's fornications with Baal. Jezebel would come to massacre the prophets of God, to place her prophets of Baal over the people of Israel. Elijah, the prophet of God, however, would come to do battle with the prophets of Baal. One of Elijah's great battles with the prophets of Jezebel was on Mount Carmel, where he slew 450 prophets in one day. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time." It's recorded that after Elijah received this message from Jezebel, that he fled to Horeb and hid himself in a cave, waiting to hear from God. Elijah survived Jezebel's threat, and after a time passed, went to Ahab with this disturbing message from the Lord. And concerning Jezebel, the Lord also spoke, saying, "The dogs shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. The dogs shall eat whoever belongs to Ahab and dies in the city, and the birds of the air shall eat whoever dies in the field. But there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do wickedness in the sight of the Lord, because Jezebel, his wife, stirred him up. It came to pass, as the Lord had said. Ahab died in battle, and the dogs licked up his blood that dripped from his chariot. And Jezebel, his wife, was thrown from the window of the wall of Jezreel. Her blood spattered on the wall and on the horse as she was trampled. When they returned to retrieve Jezebel's body, they found only the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands, for the dogs had eaten her, as prophesied by Elijah to her husband Ahab. And according to the prophecy, there would be no burial place for Jezebel in Israel.
Elijah taken up to heaven by a whirlwind.
Before the death of this wicked seductress Jezebel, Elijah was taken up into heaven in the witness of his disciple Elisha. Elijah took his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water, and it was divided this way and that, so that the two of them crossed over on dry land. And so it was, as they had crossed over, that Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask, what may I do for you before I am taken away from you?" Elisha said, "Please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me." Then it happened, as they continued on and talked, that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared with horses of fire and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. So it was, as Elijah ascended up into heaven by the whirlwind, he dropped his mantle, and Elisha retrieved it. Doing as his master before him, he struck the waters of the Jordan and caused them to separate. Elisha crossed back over the Jordan on dry land with a double anointment from his master Elijah.
Jeremiah, the weeping prophet.
In the time of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah, there was a prophet named Jeremiah who would warn the king of Judah's impending doom and captivity at the hands of Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Needless to say, his warnings were not heeded, and Judah fell into the hands of this pagan king. Jeremiah is called the weeping prophet because of his many lamentations he made for his people. For 40 years, he proclaimed a message of doom and coming captivity in Babylon. But by this time, in Judah's history, the people had grown stubborn and stiff-necked, caring nothing for the word of his prophets.
Preview of Episode 7. Babylon.
In the year 587 BCE, Jerusalem faced its darkest hour. Nebuchadnezzar, the mighty king of Babylon, had laid siege to the holy city for 18 months. The defenders' supplies were exhausted, their spirits broken. The Babylonian army breached the walls of Jerusalem, their war machines and battering rams finally overwhelming the ancient defenses. King Nebuchadnezzar himself led his troops through the shattered gates. The Temple of Solomon, the holiest site in Judaism, stood as a testament to divine glory for over 4 centuries. But Nebuchadnezzar showed no mercy. His soldiers stripped the temple of its treasures, golden vessels, sacred artifacts, and precious religious items, all destined for Babylon. The conquering army set fire to the temple. Its cedar beams burned, its golden decorations melted, and its massive stone walls crumbled. The heart of Jewish worship was reduced to ruins. Thousands of Jews were taken captive, forced to march the long road to Babylon. Craftsmen, scholars, priests, the intellectual and spiritual leadership of Judah, all led away in chains. This began the Babylonian exile, a period that would transform Jewish religion and culture forever. The fall of Jerusalem and its temple marked the end of an era, but not the end of the story. From this catastrophe, the Jewish people would preserve their faith and identity, even in a foreign land.